Hey, everybody, what's going on? We got a triple dip today. Triple dip, dip. So I did, this is my third show today. And actually, I had this one scheduled for tomorrow, but unfortunately, I have a lot of personal things that I need to get done tomorrow. I'm actually finishing up my root canal procedure. So I've had my root canal. I just need to have my crown done. So they're going to be doing that tomorrow. And I have like personal things to do in the morning. So I said, why not? I'm here inside the studio. I was going to, I went and grabbed something to eat. And I said, well, we'll come back and we'll do this show. So this is going to be a huge refresher to me. And if you don't know, if you haven't been here before on my channel, this is how I actually started kind of diving into true crime. I look at it like 880 days ago. I started doing my first lives about the Idaho 4 case. And that led, I did, oh God, probably well over 300 videos, live streams. I followed the case pretty extensively and had a plethora of guests on my show. And it was funny. I was following the Idaho 4 case, and it was, I can't remember what live stream it was on, but someone was like, hey, you live in the Massachusetts area. Have you heard about the Karen Reed case? And here I am. And that's how I kind of got into the Karen Reed case. And I wanted to come back to this because this is a case that I want to continue to follow. I'm planning to hopefully go out to Boise, Idaho when the trial starts and be outside the courthouse for a couple of days, or at least around in the area to get a vibe for what's going on. So I'm actually going to be hopefully planning that soon. And certainly we'll be streaming the trial as much as we can if cameras are allowed in the courtroom. So it's going to be interesting, but I haven't done any of this in a while. So it's going to be a lot of refresher for me, but I'm excited to start kind of diving back into the Idaho case because it brings out some pretty interesting people in this. From what I found, a lot of people are just like gun-ho Kohberger that he didn't do this like at all. And there's no way in hell. And this is conspiracy. And there's people that are just like, let him burn and let him go down with the ship because he absolutely do this. I'll be very transparent on it. In my opinion, and I understand innocent, innocent until proven guilty. I feel in my opinion of this case and everything that I have followed, all the various aspects of evidence that cover in this case, that I feel that Brian Kohberger is guilty. I think they have him on a lot of things. The first thing you have to look at, which is to me is this extreme smoking gun, is that you have a knife sheath with his DNA. Yes, it's touch DNA, but it's still DNA under 2 dead victims. And, a lot of the other things in this case too is we have video forensic evidence that's going to be there. We have digital forensic evidence that's going to be brought into this trial. We have known and found out that he possibly could have been in and around the area of 11222 King Road at least a dozen times before all of this happened. So I feel that there is enough there to get this guy. And I think that there's a lot more evidence that hasn't obviously been talked about. And we're going to hear about some of the things that recently have come up as Judge Stephen Hippler in his responses, especially about the recent DNA evidence that Kohberger team led by Ann Taylor was trying to keep out of this case. And that is the the knife sheath DNA and how they obtained it and how, she said that it was illegally obtained. And no, I mean, it was done the right way. And honestly, I think they have this guy dead to rights. Go back to about his alibi, his half-ass alibi. I was just out driving around stargazing. Yeah, in the middle of winter, dude, like out in the freezing cold. You said that you went to this park and you were stargazing, looking up at the sky at 2 o'clock in the morning. No, I'm not buying it. And the initial plea when he went in, he said he stayed silent. He let his lawyer, Ann Taylor, put in his plea for him and basically said, I think it was a quote, that he looked forward to being exonerated, not guilty, look forward to being exonerated. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think you're going to see a lot of geofencing data that comes in. And keep in mind, the feds are involved in this case. And if we want to compare and contrast it to the Karen Reed case, the feds assisted on this case, and they usually don't go after things if they don't have things dead to rights on a case. And that federal information, I believe, when this all starts coming out, is going to be extremely strong against Kohberger. I'm just trying to look at some of my notes here. I think they're going to run into a little bit of a snag, but I look at it in the sense of, just recently we found out the 2 unidentified male DNA that is at the scene. One was found in a rubber glove that was outside the 1122 King Road residence. Now, the thing that's really weird about this, and I tried going back before I did this live today, I could have sworn that there were crime scene photos, or I'm sorry, there were reporter photos taken outside that house, and I could have sworn that I saw a photo of said glove. I know it's out there, and I'm probably pretty sure that's the glove that they're talking about. And then we found out that there's unidentified male blood that was found on an upstairs banister or up around a banister. Now, here's the thing that I have to look at it. There are a lot of kids that came and went from that house. Yes, it was well-known party house. That is not in question. That is not in question. It was very well known, and we've seen that in previous body cam footage of noise complaints that have been released about the 1122 King Road house. There was a lot of people coming in. There's a lot of kids that walk in and around that neighborhood. Now, the medical glove, I don't know. Could it have been something from a science lab in school and someone forgot they had it in their pocket? They took it out and dumped it on the ground. It could be coincidence. As far as the the blood on the banister, listen, someone could have cut their hand. We know that there were plenty of men in and out of that, boys or men in and out of that house, partying, hanging out. Someone could have clipped their finger somewhere. I don't know. Those are the things and the ways that I look at it. But I think that the defense, even knowing now that Judge Hippler is going to keep in the knife sheath DNA, well, they may go to the 2 male DNAs and use that in their defense, So let's take a look here. I have some articles that we're going to look at and source, and I actually thought this was kind of funny. I went back and actually pulled my actual first live stream about this case because I was just doing videos at the time, and so much has changed. The confidence that I have is just so different. And this one was from back 2 years ago, January 25th of 23. So pretty close to around this time. Let's just advance a month, almost to the day. And this is funny. I got to play this like a quick clip. I'm like nervous on camera. I'm not pronouncing things correctly. I'm like all over the place. This was like really my first true crime, I guess, live stream. It's kind of funny, but I'll play a couple minutes of it here. Yes.
Weird. The music always hits. Oh, I love that music. I love that.
That was in my bedroom then too.
Welcome back to the Opinionated Idiot Show. I am live.
Yeah, so I called myself the Opinionated Idiot back then. Now look, you can see the meme cat up there. We got the meme cat up there. Okay, we got the meme cat up there, so we brought that back. I kind of wish I kept the name, but it was like, for me, I was thinking like future. Like, all right, if the channel expands and it grows, I want to have kind of a professional sounding name. So if I go to like a Todd McGee or a Nan Gallagher, attorney Nan Gallagher, retired state police Todd McGee, I was like, I'm Brian from LTL Media. Sounds a little bit more professional than I'm Brian from the Opinionated Idiot, even though that's great. I love that name. But and we're actively growing the beard back. I'm going to say I'm actively growing it back right now. But let's
I'm back play a little bit of this, guys. I'm glad to be back. We have a lot to get into this evening, and I'm sure that I have brought over a lot of new subscribers to the channel here. I do appreciate all of you, and we know that we're going to be discussing a lot about this Brian Kohberger murder case, the Ohio 4 murders. If you have not heard about that, back in November of 22, on the 12th of November, there was a crazy, mysterious death of 4 college students, a murder that happened. and was just seemed like it was going to be unsolved at that time. Investigation went on for about a month, a little bit over a month, and people were freaking out. Like, was this person?
But anyway, you get my point. You know, like I said, practice makes perfect in all of this. Practice your craft, improve your craft, you know, and things come a little bit more natural. I was so nervous in front of the camera. But wow, we've come a long way. We have come a long way. You know, we have come a long way. It's funny. It's hilarious. I think it's a little bit funny. I was like looking back at myself and seeing how things have changed or improved. All right, so let's pull up some of these articles. I'm going to try to do them in order. And I talked about this unidentified male DNA. And I think that's going to be a big thing that the defense now is going to probably go back and continue to kind of bounce on and use this in their defense. But let's read a little bit about this. I'm not going to read through all of the article, and then I do have some videos that we're going to go and play through. One is going to actually walk through all of kind of the forensic data breakdown of, you know, how they basically are going to pin down Kohberger in this case and what is pretty damning to his case. And then Crime Fix from Law and Crime just released a video about the DNA evidence that Judge Hippler is going to allow in, and how damaging that's going to be to Kohberger's case as well too. Let me see. Mania, thank you so much. Yeah, big donkey, congrats. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. This case gets cray. People get cray about this case. And that's why I kind of want to start picking this back up. Again, I have 300 videos on my channel about the Idaho 4 murders. I've had some really fantastic guests, some experts that have come in. I know that I was really the first one, and I don't even know if this has been talked about yet, but I watched a video, an interview of Stephen and Christy Gonsalves, and they were talking about getting items back of Kaylee's, and they said that, you know, they went months. It was all in the evidence. And they actually talked about a Bluetooth speaker that they got back. And I went, oh, it's kind of interesting. Why would the police take her Bluetooth speaker? And I went, okay, well, how about this? Now we know Kohberger's phone was put into airplane mode and then taken out of airplane mode to kind of create this timeline. But I thought to myself, could there have been a possibility that we knew the alleged, evidence out there is that he was in and around the King Road house at least around a dozen times. Okay. So I thought, well, maybe this clown, when he was driving in and around King Road, had his phone not in airplane mode. And let's say he even got ballsy enough one time to walk close enough to that house where his phone would make a handshake to any of those devices inside the house. And I said, could it be a possibility that he had his Bluetooth on, he got close enough to where in and around Kaylee's speaker was and made that connection? Because why would they keep her Bluetooth speaker in evidence? That would make no sense to me. And I said, there's got to be a possibility. I actually had a Verizon expert come on my show at that time, and you can go back and watch these videos. If you just type in Idaho 4, on the search button, Idaho 4 Bluetooth, there's plenty of videos about it. And, I said to myself, could this be a possibility connection? Funny thing is, we went back and actually watched one of the complaint videos when there was a noise complaint. And it's the one when Kaylee comes out of the slider and she walks out. And if you look in to that slider, there's actually a Bluetooth speaker right there. Now, I don't know if that's Kaylee's, but it could be a possibility that speaker was right there at that door, and there had been a connection from Brian Kohberger's phone. He might have handshaked with that device or connected to it. So if you're curious about that and you haven't seen any of that, you can watch all that on my channel. Just go to the search bar, type in Idaho 4 and Bluetooth, and we'll bring up plenty of videos about that. So it was very interesting. It was interesting. Okay, so let's check this out. Unidentified male blood DNA found at the Idaho home of murdered college students that could aid in Brian Kohberger's defense. And I think this is going to probably be the route that they go down now, knowing that the knife sheath DNA is going to be allowed in this case. So I'm not going to read all of this. We'll just skim through it. Detectives who investigated the Moscow, Idaho college student homicides found blood at the crime scene from two still unidentified males. Attorneys for the man charged with the murder, relevant at a recent hearing, hinted to a possible legal defense strategy at trial. An unknown individual's blood DNA was discovered on the handrail of the off-campus home where the 4 University of Idaho students were fatally stabbed. Another unknown blood sample was found on a glove that police located just outside the home. Brian Kohberger's lead defense attorney told the court late last month. In the bed, and here we go, in the bed of one of the stabbing victims, police said they also found what may be regarded in this case as the key piece of evidence, a leather sheath of a fixed blade knife. During the process, DNA was discovered on the sheath that later matched directly to Kohberger. Police and prosecutors said in illegal filings from June 2023, his defense said that the state claim is not from blood, but rather from a touch DNA on the sheath located at the violent crime scene. So the way that I look at it is your DNA is on a fixed blade knife sheath under 2 dead victims, in a bed with 2 dead victims. And how did that get there? Now, if you're going to talk about and sit here that police planted it, how? Where did they obtain his touch DNA and seal this for months? And they were going to build this big conspiracy and pin it on on Kohberger. That's it. It's highly unlikely. I always look at it. Everything in these cases is not a conspiracy. But again, like I said, I think they have the goods on this guy. And believe me, you know, what you're hearing here too in the media and what we're seeing on some of the unsealed documents is not all the evidence in this case. So in some of the filings, in some of the filings, the defense said DNA from 2 additional males found inside the home, as well as DNA found on the glove outside. Lake County prosecutor Bill Thompson told the court at a hearing in August 2023 that those DNA samples were not uploaded to try to identify them through the FBI's national database known as CODIS because they were not eligible based on criteria. It was not publicly known until last month's court hearing. At least 2 unknown DNA samples came from blood. And the type of third male DNA, so actually it's 3. I apologize about that. The type of male DNA sample remains unclear, as if it was a source had since been identified. But police did not disclose the unidentified blood samples to the magistrate judge on December 2022 when they sought a warrant for Kohberger's arrest. Defense attorney Ann Taylor alleged at last month's hearing, and prosecutors did not dispute. It's funny. I hear a lot about Ann Taylor. I hear a lot about from the Kohberger, the very pro Kohberger people, like, oh, she's amazing and she's great. I think she just gets turned over by judges all the time. I think she just gets smacked in the face. And this was a big one from Hitler. It was a big one from Hitler to allow in this DNA evidence. And I can't remember the exact quote, but I'm sure it's going to be in one of these videos. He said something like, you know, basically the DNA found on these 2 dead girls on a knife sheath, that's all day, any day of the week. And I don't know the full quote, but he basically was like, that's enough to pin someone down to a crime scene. And that will be debated in court. It'll be, brought up in court, and it'll be for a jury to decide. Let's see. I want to go in here. How does that even, is a quote here. It says, does that even disclose prelude to finding a probable cause to when the DNA match between the DNA sheath and Mr. Kohberger, said Taylor. Isn't that probable cause? Oh, that's it. This is from the judge. Isn't that probable cause every day and twice on Sunday? It's not good. Probable cause shouldn't be considered in a vacuum. And by the way, we're going to talk about a vacuum here in a second, because a new piece of evidence or revelation has come forward in this case. Taylor responded. She indicated that that the decision before Hitler had greater implications on overreaching the criminal justice system. So I think just some things that Kohberger's team's going to load into their chamber, knowing that this new DNA, knowing that Kohberger's DNA is at the scene, but they could turn around and say, well, wait a minute. How do we know that XYZ, these two unidentified male DNA, didn't have a friendship with Kohberger, and they were the ones that went into this house and planted this evidence? That could be a type of defense that they go in. They really did it, but used his touch DNA on this knife sheath. So be it, whatever it may be. But I don't know. I think, in my opinion, I think they got the goods on this guy. All right, let's talk a little bit about the DNA that's going to be allowed. Obviously, that is the knife sheath DNA. And I'm going to play this video here from Banfield and Stephen Gonzalez. So it says, shakeup hits Kohberger defense after judge rules to keep DNA in Idaho murder trial. And let's see what Steve Gonzalez had to say about this new
to have you tonight,
information.
Especially with this incredibly earth-shattering news in this case. I can just see it on your face. This is such welcome news to you.
You got it.
Yeah, this was a day that we've been looking forward to for almost 2.5 years. And it's kind of like the last Hail Mary that they were going for, to just throw it all out, put all the chips on the table and go for it. And we like the way that things turned out. We're going to go into the case with the same evidence that we started with. And that's amazing. That's a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying game, set, match, right? With that DNA evidence that ties what would have been a complete stranger right to the bed where your daughter was murdered. I mean, that is a hell of a bad fact for defense. Listen, the way it works is on their side of the ledger, Brian Kohberger can cry into his defense attorney's shoulders and ask, what's next? What do we do? What happens? On your side of the ledger, it's the prosecutors. Effectively, they're your lawyers. Do they talk to you? Do they get you through this? Do they help you with the...
What just happened? What are we doing here? Ad? Oh, God, there's an ad? Come on.
With the patience factor as you wait all these months for these decisions.
The communication,
I agree.
it comes and goes. I mean, I try to assume that they're just super, super busy, but I'm an active person, so I wouldn't find my own lawyer. I found my own prosecutor, my own person who understands law to an extent that they do, even better than some of the people that are in that courtroom. So I feel like we're pretty much informed, and we're prepared for what's going to happen, and we're all working as one unit. And it's good to have days like this. It took a long time, but and people like Payne and Moyer, who literally were dragged through the mud, and people accuse those guys of lying or misrepresenting. It's a great day for them. These are men that dedicated their lives to our community, and today is a day for us to all embrace that everybody's seen them doing a good job, and everything that they did will be part of the case, and all those challenges were invalid.
I'm going to pause this really quick, and God bless Peggy. I love Peggy. Peggy and I were having a kind of a friendly banter back and forth in a comment section. And listen, Peggy has every right to think this way. She thinks that Kohberger's not guilty, and that's fine. You can feel that way. It was funny. We were going back and forth, and she goes, so why do you think? I think she says with a sense of like, why do you think he's guilty? And I said, well, I have like 300 videos that I went through this. I'm pretty well prepared on. I'm rusty right now. It's been a while since I've talked about this case, but it's definitely something that I want to continue to do, because I think it's going to be a huge trial. It's going to be a big trial. It's good to get back and refresh and get educated on this. And look, I'm not going to get everything right here tonight. I've been so engrossed in Karen Reed's case for, better part of the last 2 years. And we're getting ready to possibly go back to trial here in April. And I'll be there. I'll be outside the courtroom, hopefully inside the courtroom again. And, continuing to cover that as well, too. But it's always nice to go back and say, hey, this is a case that kind of got me started, and I have not forgot about it, along with the other things that I've covered on this case. Chelsea Grimm, I was just thinking about her the other day and how tragic that whole case is. We've gotten into the trooper Enrique Garcia case. We've now started talking about Robert Brooks and some of the other various cases that we picked up on the channel here. Sandra Birchmore, just en route. So, it's been kind of a wild ride. It's been a wild ride. But Peggy's great. I love Peggy. I love her avatar. All right, let's go.
You were referencing that you went and got your own lawyer, that Shannon Gray. We've spoken to him a lot. He seems very invested and certainly very caring. when it comes to your yours and your family's benefit here. And you know, it's like you still want to know what else, like what still worries you. This is a great day. Obviously, this is the best day, but what still worries you ahead?
There's little pieces. If you read all through all the documentation, there's a lot of paperwork that came out today, a lot of details that weren't out. We look forward to that because there's details that we've had to hide, the things that we've had to keep to our chest. And the more that once they say it, then we can say it. You know, we can bring more details out. And we said a kill kit, you're going to read those documentations. You're going to find out that this individual left that house and they.
Tara, you know what? I agree. I really do. But corruption is not in every case. Corruption is not in every case. For me, the nail down thing in this case, because this is the thing that you have to try to explain to me. And I encourage you, please write me an email. Let's talk live podcast@gmail.com. Okay. The thing that you have to explain, and I need to know this. Like, I really want to know. I'm encouraging people to write me. Please tell me how Kohberger's DNA got on that knife sheath. Okay. Because a lot of people think that the law enforcement planted this. So how did they get his DNA? This is what I need to know, because DNA samples weren't taken until after. They swabbed his cheek afterwards. So they had the DNA sample. So what are you going to say? That they didn't test the DNA and then they took a swab and then they did that on the knife sheath and that's how his DNA got there? Not going to work. So you got to tell me. This is what I'm serious. Write me. I want to know from the people's perspective that think Kohberger is not guilty. I'm not going to criticize you. I just want to hear your version of the events. You have to tell me how Kohberger's DNA, the touch DNA, got on that knife sheath and ended up under 2 dead victims. What, you think he went out to like an Army Navy store and he touched it and then the real killers went in and bought the same knife and put it there? The happening of that would be insane. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? The probability of that would be almost impossible. So I'm serious. Write me. Let's talk live podcast@gmail.com. Put in your subject line Idaho 4 and let me know, because I enjoy reading the emails in versions of events, because I just don't see it. I think he has a lot to explain for how that DNA, that knife sheath got there. All right, let's keep playing on.
People spotted, these things that were going out with him.
Save thousands on all remaining 2024 models during the Metro West Hyundai 2024 sales event. Start your next adventure with the modern 2024 Tucson Hybrid for just...
I don't... I found this video on YouTube, but it didn't have the full interview. They cut like 2 minutes out of it, and that's why I just played it off the website. But again, websites have to make their money too. Let's see. Wait for this ad to skip. All right, here we go. That's kind of annoying. And we lost sound. Good stuff.
Part of our community. He was not a part of North Idaho. He's not even a citizen of Idaho. This person came here with a plan, premeditated, full-blooded murder. And then he wanted to be a successful murderer, like a serial killer, somebody he studied. This is a sick individual that killed people sleeping in their beds, and there is no reason to have capital punishment if this isn't the case for it. So we're going to rely on all the people in the true crime community, all the people watching this, because it's going to get rough. We're going to have to put somebody all the way to the very ends of justice, but I think that's necessary. I feel like some of the reasons we have these mass shootings, school shootings and things, is because we don't do a good job of showing the very end of how this ends. And once kids see the full picture of what...
Save thousands on all remaining 2024 models during the Metro West Hyundai...
All right, I'm done with that video. Fucking ad after ad after ad. All right, so we've talked about that. Oh, this was interesting. This just recently came out. Fox News. Witness to Idaho murder says intruder with bushy eyebrows carried vacuum out of the crime scene, and that just recently came out in court documents. A surviving housemate of 4 University Idaho students killed in the home invasion knife attack told detectives that she saw a bushy-eyed intruder walking out the back door with a vacuum-type object in his hand after looking at her in the eyes, according to newly unveiled court documents. I can hear the conspiracies now. The revelation came in with Judge Stephen Hippler's denial of 30-year-old suspect Brian Kohberger's motion for a Franks hearing, a real legal proceeding in which the defendant has a chance to attack the warrants in court before a trial. Kohberger was arrested on December 30th, 2022 in connection with the home invasion massacre that happened on November 13th of that year. His defense had attacked witness credibility, arguing that she admitted to being in a dream-like state. Well, it's kind of like stargazing, right? On a cloudy winter night after witnessing a traumatic attack. The judge said that the argument could be fodder for cross-examination at trial, but had no bearings on probable cause used to justify the suspect's arrest. Although the judge said she was likely drunk during the murders, he explained that her statements to investigators on 3 separate occasions included a notably similar description of the suspect each time. She said he was a tall white male, lean and taller than she was. Each time she said she heard an unknown male voice telling someone inside the house that he was here to help. Yikes. It's frightening. And that he walked out the rear sliding door without saying anything to her. Kohberger's defense had argued police unfairly paraphrased her comments in the original probable cause affidavit, but the judge rejected that notion. While she left out the vacuum detail when speaking with an officer, she later mentioned it in 2 separate discussions with detectives. However, she also admitted that her memory was fuzzy and cloudy, according to the documents. Everything was kind of blurry, she told investigators, like I don't fully remember, I would say. Other evidence, however, corroborated her timeline and the suspect's description. Hippler found in leaving her confusion out of the affidavit did not impact probable cause. If he was exceptionally careful, wore booties, etc., and could explain lack of other forensics, said Paul Morano, a retired New York Police Department inspector who was closely following the case, especially if it was a wet vac. This is such crazy. Search warrant related to Kohberger's apartment in Pullman, Washington, where he was studying for a PhD in criminology, shows police took a dust container from a Bissell Power Force vacuum from a closet near the front door, where they also found a black glove and receipts. An online search shows Bissell Power Force lineup consists of canister and upright vacuums, most of which appear bulky, but there's a few which were described as compact and lightweight. Details about the seized vacuum contents were not included in the filing. He's probably trying to clean up hair and fiber, said John Kelly, a criminal profile who has interviewed multiple serial killers. Kelly previously said that he believes a suspect such as Kohberger would have used his graduate degree experience in criminology to attempt to clean up and stage a crime scene. Police arrived at Kohberger's Washington apartment shortly after he was arrested at his parents' house in Pennsylvania during a winter break from classes. They found no shower curtain inside, and trash cans have been emptied. What they did collect were hair samples on a bedding with blood on it. Detective noted that they believe Kohberger had pre-planned the attack and may have reviewed other knife murders before the quadruple slaying. Police also searched his office but collected no physical evidence there. About 10 miles from where Kohberger was studying. His background of the case. Let's see. Previous released court documents describe the crime scene, which spanned across 2 floors and 6-bedroom rental home on King Road in Moscow, Idaho, as significantly bloody. The house has been since demolished, and you know my ideas on that. I was really pissed off that the house had been demolished because you can't recreate that. You can't recreate the feeling inside a room, the acoustics inside a room, the look and feel inside that room, and it would have been good for that house to be there for a jury to walk through it and be able to see how narrow was those stairs to navigate. Is it possible to time someone and walk through that house and commit those murders? That would actually probably been good for the defense. I'm actually sticking up for the defense here. You know, is it possible? You know, the timeline is what? Between 12 and 9 minutes. And I've heard 14 as well. But that would have been possible. Let's time it. Let's walk through it. Could he have done it? Could he have walked through these areas? Should it, could it have been multiple people that assisted in this? Is there a possibility? In one instance, he knocked the defense for arguing that details about the genetic genealogy techniques used to generate leads and eventually lead to Kohberger were improperly withheld from the magistrate judge who issued early warrants in this case. Let's see. The court concludes that in the search warrants were not invalid, which based on the omission of the defendant's identification through IgG, because the information would have been bolstered. Probable cause for searches, Hippler wrote in his decision. Kohberger's trial is scheduled for start in August, which is August 11th, and he could face the death penalty if convicted. So there's that. There's that. All right, let's watch this video from Crime Fix on Law and Crime Network.
This isn't like DNA in blood on the wall from Mr. Kohberger. That's not there.
Brian Kohberger's attorneys had hoped to get evidence thrown out in his quadruple murder case. Instead, they suffer a crushing defeat months ahead of trial. I have the judge's orders and the new details about the case the judge included. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Brian Kohberger's lawyers spent 2 days questioning witnesses and arguing in front of the judge to get evidence in his case.
And just recently, I think Bicca Barlow is going to join the team. And forgive me because I forgot the lawyer's name. It's basically he's the second lawyer in charge. It's either Joe or Jim. Again, I need a refresher. He is now just going to be a consultant on the case. But Bicca Barlow is joining the team, and she was a DNA expert that actually testified for the defense quite a while back. And, I think this is going to be the major thing is attacking this DNA for the defense because they got to get him. Yeah, Jay, thank you. Jay Logston, thank you. They got to get him the defense got to get him as far away from that knife sheath, in my opinion. So they're going to bring her in and have her essentially attack this DNA. Okay, let's go on here.
Pressed. That means thrown out. Kohberger argued the investigative genetic genealogy used to identify him as a suspect violated his rights, along with the search of his parents' trash in Pennsylvania. He also wanted the searches of his many, many email accounts, his Apple and Google accounts, his cell phone and Amazon accounts thrown out, along with anything he said during his arrest. But Judge Stephen Hippler said it all can come in and that police did not violate Kohberger's rights. Judge Hippler also denied Kohberger's request for a Franks hearing, where Kohberger's lawyers wanted to show that law enforcement either lied to obtain search warrants or were reckless in giving false information. In the judge's orders, Hippler released new details about the case that we didn't know previously. Kohberger faces the possibility of the death penalty if he's convicted of murdering University of Idaho students Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle in a house in Moscow, Idaho in November of 2022. Kohberger maintains he didn't commit the murders. Let's start with the Franks hearing. That's where Kohberger's lawyers wanted to question officers about their belief that they provided false information in affidavits to get search warrants. Judge Hippler discussed the standard at a hearing last month.
I mean, I guess from a Franks perspective, though, the question is there a material intentional misstatement or a reckless misstatement?
Kohberger claimed 17 affidavits for search warrants contained false statements or exculpatory information. That's information that could exonerate Brian Kohberger. Kohberger's lawyers pointed to statements police used from a surviving roommate identified as DM in affidavits.
They also don't tell the magistrate that this witness has claimed memory problems. that this witness has claimed that she's not sure what she heard or saw was real or whether it was at a dream. There are 2 references to not remembering. A couple of days later, there's the 3rd interview, and there's references to not remembering, being drunk, a statement, I don't know any of it. Like half this stuff, I don't know if it's a dream or if it's real. That's at page 399. At page 406, I don't know if this was real or in my mind was just like playing with me. But from what I think I heard, someone was crying in the bathroom. These are definite statements that were not given to the magistrate and in fact were brushed over. And credibility is really, really important when that person is relied on in the investigation.
A Franks hearing would be required if false or omitted information was necessary to a finding of probable cause. Judge Hippler found that neither occurred and denied the request for the Franks hearing. Hippler wrote, while defendant's challenge may be fodder for cross-examination, it is not the proper subject of a Franks motion. Defendant's own proffer establishes that DM's accounts were remarkably consistent throughout her multiple interviews with law enforcement, and further, the probable cause affidavits are very consistent with her accounts. Second, DM's interview statements that her memories were fuzzy and dreamlike and may have been affected by being tired or under the influence of alcohol do not call into question her reliability to the extent Franks would require disclosure. Finally, DM's failure to recognize the photo of defendant is of no consequence given that the intruder she saw was masked. Judge Hippler wrote that DM's description of the man she saw in the house was remarkably consistent. You heard that. A white male with a lean body type, slightly taller than her, about 5'10", with a mask covering his nose, mouth, and forehead. At the last hearing, Kohberger's lawyers said police should have written in their affidavit that DM couldn't identify Brian Kohberger when she was shown his mugshot after his arrest. But Hippler said that didn't matter and it wasn't exculpatory. Hippler quoted DM as saying in an interview, I have no clue. From what I remember, I just remember seeing this figure that was more of like the skinnier tone build and some mask on. I don't know if it was covering his mouth, his nose, or below his mouth and nose. I just remember he was white, but I didn't know how he was white. I just knew he was. And I knew he looked at me because of the bushy eyebrows. I want to tell you about a free app I've tried. It's called Upside.
We're going to speed up through because I'm not sponsored by them.
Of information we hadn't heard until Hippler's order. DM said the man carried a vacuum type object as he walked toward the sliding glass door. Is this something the killer took from the home? We don't know. Hippler also denied the request for a Franks hearing based on Kohberger's claim that police didn't disclose in affidavits that the victim's blood and DNA had not been found in Kohberger.
I think and Jeff's been watching me for a long time. And this is the thing why I really I'm encouraging people to do this because I want to hear your version of this. Please, I just need to know, and believe me, a lot of the people in the chat are being outmatched. 62% of the chat think that Kohberger's guilty, according to my poll. Seriously, write me. Let's talk live podcast at gmail.com. Put right in that subject line, Idaho 4. Explain to me. I just want to hear your theory of the events. Explain to me how the DNA got on that button knife sheath and then ended up under 2 dead victims. I'm serious. I just want to hear your theory. I'm not going to judge, but I'm just curious to see where you're coming from. Please write me. All right, let's keep playing here.
Apartment or car. Kohberger's attorney, Ann Taylor, had made other arguments for a Franks hearing when it came to information she said the police did not include in the affidavits.
You know, the identification to this sheath that maybe seems like it would be really good. You don't really even know how that happened, and you don't know how it got there. This isn't like DNA in blood on the wall from Mr. Kohberger. That's not there. That doesn't exist in this scene. You're talking about an item that the question of how should be, especially when you know about the other male DNA in the house, and especially when you know about.
So what I'm seeing here is a lot of just like I said, Ann Taylor's job, what she's going to do here is try to push Kohberger because she knows he's dead to rights. He's got DNA under 2 dead victims on a knife sheath, a potential murder weapon, which the murder weapon's never been found. But you're going to have to explain at the end of the day why that DNA is there. So she's going to try to distance him as far as she can from that knife sheath. And I think that's going to be her major job here. It's going to be a battle like the DNA evidence in this case, amongst a lot of stuff. Digital forensics, you're going to have probably video, you're going to have his Google searches, you're going to have things that he ordered in and around the time. There's supposedly receipts of items that he bought. So it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a very, very interesting case. People are going to be very polarized in this case. You're going to either so pro Kohberger and like, there's no way in hell this guy did this, or you are like, go down, burn. So it's going to be an interesting case. It's going to be very
About
interesting.
the lack of DNA connections. There's also no connection between the people in the house and Mr. Kohberger based on their cell phones, based on social media accounts. There's just no connection.
Part of Taylor's argument had to do with
It's a little goofy because, and I don't want to make this sound like bad, but people get like murdered. Like someone could just literally be driving down the street right now. They see a victim walking on the side of the road and they grab them and murder them. You know, maybe they're a serial killer or they have a fixation with this particular type of person, the way they look. Doesn't mean that they had a connection. Doesn't mean that they had a connection, or something could be spontaneous. You're fueling something inside this person, an urge that they need to do something. So it's kind of a goofy statement. There's no connection.
The investigative genetic genealogy and the lack of connection between Kohberger and the victims. But Judge Hippler said Taylor's argument didn't meet the bar. Now to Kohberger's request to suppress his arrest at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. Kohberger had argued that police violated his rights when they broke down the door to his parents' home in the early morning hours of November 30th of 2022. At a hearing last month, Detective Payne talked about where they found Kohberger's car during the arrest.
Where was Mr. Kohberger's car parked at the time of his arrest?
It was in the garage.
Was it later seized pursuant to a search warrant from that garage?
Yes, ma'am.
The police planned to arrest Kohberger by knocking and announcing, but switched to a no-knock warrant. Judge Hippler's order denying Kohberger's motion explains why. Hippler wrote, at 12:33 a.m., snipers observed a kitchen light turn on and saw a taller, young white male wearing a black hoodie standing near the glass sliding door leading out to the deck. At 12:40 a.m., the same person was seen again. This time, officers were able to positively identify the person as defendant. At 12:55 a.m., the light turned on in the garage where defendant's vehicle was believed to be parked. At 1:03 a.m., lights flashed in the garage as if the vehicle was being locked or unlocked by a key fob.
Wow.
At 1:09 a.m., defendant was seen in the kitchen of the home, this time wearing rubber gloves and handling a plastic baggie.
Why would you do that? Why would anybody do that? And I also heard in like one of the documentaries, I think like a long time ago, when they were going to arrest him, that they actually the FBI or the local law enforcement were actually driving by his parents' house, and they almost ran over Kohberger because he was going to hide his trash.
Based on these observations, law enforcement believed defendant was potentially destroying evidence from the vehicle that was related to the homicides. Law enforcement was also aware that defendant possessed a Glock handgun, prompting a concern over officer safety due to the defendant's heightened mental state of awareness or threat level of police possibly tracking him. These are called exigent circumstances, and that allows law enforcement to arrest someone using a no-knock warrant. Hippler went on to write, the executing officer's new defendant, based on compelling evidence, was believed to have orchestrated an unprovoked and exceptionally brutal quadruple homicide with a knife. They had information he was in possession of a Glock handgun. They knew he was in the residence, awake, potentially aware of law enforcement's presence, and potentially destroying evidence or perhaps retrieving his gun or a weapon from the vehicle. His vehicle was in the garage nearby, thus giving him a means of quick escape. Judge Hippler wrote that Brian Kohberger was taken into custody in a bedroom, and a .22 caliber Glock handgun was found in his bedroom.
Wow.
Kohberger also wanted any statements he made to law enforcement suppressed, arguing they were the fruit of the poisonous tree from the arrest that he claimed violated his rights. His attorneys acknowledged officers had read Kohberger's rights twice.
Were you present when Detective Gilbert Mirandized Mr. Kohberger at the station?
Gilbertson?
Gilbertson, sorry, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And that took place after Mr. Kohberger was first seized in his home, right?
Correct.
That also took place after he was transported in the back of a police car to the station, right?
Correct.
You noted in your report that Detective Gilbertson had a recorder in his
that's
pocket
right.
at the time of the interview.
I was just going to say that. And hashtag free Karen Reed, hashtag Hank, I love that, said he did. He made a statement. Was I the only one arrested? I think something to that notion. So yeah, this is crazy. All right, let's go.
So,
Were there any recordings that took place at the Kohberger home when entry was made into the house?
I do not know.
Judge Hippler wrote that Kohberger told officers that he had that handgun and engaged in small talk with them after his arrest. He said that officers asked them what was going on with his arrest as they drove him to the police barracks. Hippler wrote, the state does not dispute defendant was in custody when first detained. However, there is no evidence before the court that defendant was interrogated at any point from his arrest to the time he was formally interviewed by Detective Payne, at which point he was Mirandized. The sole evidence is that
I'm just going to pull this up really quick because let's see right here. Back on December 30th, 2022, Idaho murder suspect Brian Kohberger allegedly asked police if anyone else had been arrested. Let's see. Suspect arrested for murders of University of Idaho students allegedly asked police if anyone else had been taken into custody. Let's see. Not much, but just have that quote in there. Allegedly, again. Allegedly, again. Let's go back to the video here. It's been good review. It's been a while. I'm learning a lot of new stuff too. Let's see. Charm free, $20. Thank you for the support. So I'm not a scientist, but think of trace DNA as being written in the alphabet. The FBI seems to flush out the DNA numerically, and there's proof of misconduct. The proof is testified to. Read the transcripts. All right. We will read them. All right, let's go.
Defendant engaged in small talk with officers, with the only exception being when he briefly asked about his arrest and was told that investigators were going to speak to him at the station about the situation. Voluntary or spontaneous statements or questions unprompted by interrogation fall outside the scope of Miranda. Next, Hippler's order denying Kohberger's request to suppress the DNA evidence in the case because of the genetic genealogy work used to identify Brian Kohberger as a suspect. A male DNA profile was found on a K-bar knife sheath found next to Maddie Mogen's body. The crime lab named that DNA profile Q1.1. Hippler wrote, the Idaho State Police delivered Q1.1 to Othram on November 22, 2022. Othram developed a SNP profile from Q1.1 and searched Family Tree DNA in GEDmatch Pro. This work revealed 4 brothers of interest, all of whom were low matches to Q1.1. A footnote states these brothers did not share defendant's last name. So that was an interesting bit of information right there. Early in the investigation, Othram came up with 4 brothers determined to be low matches. Then the FBI got involved. And this is where Kohberger argued his rights were violated. Kohberger said the FBI ran the profile through MyHeritage and GEDmatch, 2 databases that do not allow law enforcement to access their databases. Only Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch Pro allow law enforcement access. Kohberger argued that agents accessing MyHeritage and GEDmatch violated a DOJ policy But Hippler said the policy was simply guidance and didn't place any legal restrictions on law enforcement. Kohberger had also argued that law enforcement needed a warrant for the work.
Your Honor, our position is that the court should suppress the IgG identification and everything that flows from that. This is supported by Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, due process, Article 1, Section 17 of the Idaho Constitution. Your Honor, there was no warrant for several phases of the search that led to the IgG work, investigative genetic genealogy. And we think every single one of those stages, a warrant was required. None was given. And so this must be suppressed.
Hippler disagreed, writing, "The state denies that the testing of the DNA from the sheath was a search, pointing out the DNA was lawfully seized evidence from the scene of the crime. The state further contends defendant has not demonstrated he had a reasonable expectation of privacy in this DNA because he had abandoned it and or because he has not shown the existence of a reasonable privacy interest society is willing to recognize." Judge Hippler said he found no violation of Brian Kohberger's Fourth Amendment rights. I want to bring in Philip Dubé. He's kind of been on this journey with me through these motions to suppress since the very beginning, and he's been right on all of these issues. He's court-appointed counsel. He is based in Los Angeles. So, Philip, with the investigative genetic genealogy motion to suppress, I mean, all of these motions to suppress were denied.
Sorry. No, thank you.
But you believed that this would be denied because you didn't believe that Brian Kohberger had a privacy right to other people's DNA uploaded to a public database. And the judge found there was no Fourth Amendment violation here.
That's correct. He had no standing, as we call it in the law. And the U.S. Supreme Court revolutionized the standing.
I do. And this guy has big veneers. Yeah, I was just thinking that self, my Karen G. He's got big veneers. I do. I'm actually going to be planning for it soon. My only nervousness in all of it is if I can book an Airbnb, because I've never done it before, usually just stay in hotels. But if I can book an Airbnb, like for the week, I'm just nervous. The trial date is August 11th, and let's say it gets pushed back. I don't know how all that works. I don't know if you have to pay a fee to cancel it or move it. I mean, I guess you can just look into their policies. But I do want to start actually trying to book that soon. So, you know, something I'm going to be looking into, airfare and all that fun stuff. So, no, sorry, coffee cake. Nope. Sorry. Nah, I'm not going to go there. Nope. Sorry. Can't do it. I appreciate it, but nah. No thanks. All right, let's
go back in the 60s in a case called Katz, K-A-T-Z versus United States. And what a defendant has to show just preliminarily to suppress a search warrant or a search is that he or she has a subjective expectation of privacy, and objectively it has to be the type of interest in privacy that society is willing to embrace. The court found no. He had neither.
Oh, it's good to know.
He didn't have a subjective or objective expectation of privacy. Instead, everybody else maybe who was in the database that uploaded their DNA did. And the right to suppress evidence is not only personal to a defendant, but the item that you're seeking to suppress has to be personal to that defendant as well. So, for example, had the family of Brian Kohberger been charged, that might be a different conversation because his heir's DNA was uploaded into these private data banks, and they have their own privacy and contractual interests in the specimens that were uploaded. But as to Brian, the judge got it right.
Yeah, and I thought there was some interesting stuff in here as well. Like Ann Taylor was arguing that the DNA on the sheath, that single source male profile that they're now calling Q1.1, that they needed a warrant, that the cops needed a warrant when that was sent to the crime lab to even like test that DNA or search that DNA. I was like, that sounds bizarro to me, because that seems like as long as you had a warrant to get the sheath or to seize the sheath from the crime scene, of course you're going to send that thing off to the lab and swab it and see if there's if there's anything on there that could lead you to a suspect. It's a major piece of evidence. So I thought that was a pretty interesting case she was trying to make, especially because, you know, if it is indeed Brian Kohberger's knife sheath and he leaves it at the crime scene because he screws up in the commission of a crime, oh, well, you screwed up. You can't just say, oh, well, I mean, he's saying it's not his sheath anyway. So how can you try to say you needed a warrant to test the DNA?
You can't, which is why Judge Hippler got it right. You got to understand something. He disclaimed all possessory and ownership interest in that sheath, if assuming it was him who left it there. It would be one thing if he was saying, yeah, that's my knife sheath. What are you doing with it? You shouldn't have it. Well, then there's an argument to be made that maybe they do need a search warrant, but he's not claiming any interest in it. So what does the law say? The law says it's deemed abandoned. It's deemed disclaimed. And if that's the case, the police can collect it, test it, and do whatever they want with it and book it into evidence. And that's what they did. He just doesn't like the fact that he got sloppy at that crime scene and left it there. But he gave up any Fourth Amendment interest in it by leaving it there.
It's an interesting thing. And then the whole argument about the trash at the parents' house, too. I thought that was interesting because that to me seems like
like, oh, it shouldn't be, you shouldn't be able to, to pick that up. But if you look at like Rex Heuermann, how did they get his DNA? Well, he bit into a pizza crust. He left that pizza inside of trash, discarded it. The police came along. They grabbed it. They swabbed it. DNA, bam. Rex Heuermann, produced Rex Heuermann. So, anything that's pretty much to the curb and trash can become evidence. What they always say, another man's trash is another man's treasure, or whatever the saying is.
Well settled thing. Even if there's a local ordinance that says only the trash company can pick up the trash. Like once you put your stuff in the trash and you set it out at the curb or it's in your trash can, even on your driveway or whatever, I always thought that was fair game, and the judge felt the same.
Yeah, no, the judge was absolutely correct. Mere violation of a local ordinance does not mean that it violates the Constitution. There are separate bodies of law. It might mean that the homeowner, for example, won't get cited by the city if they don't follow local ordinances, or that they forfeit their garbage pickup a certain number of days a month, that kind of thing. But to say that as a result of this, that you can impute a violation of a local ordinance regarding trash pickup to law enforcement and trying to work up a homicide, it's actually laughable. So the court found no, even a violation of that local ordinance does not violate the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, they're definitely pulling on every thread, though. They're trying to get creative here. One thing I want to move on to now is this whole argument about the Google warrants, the Amazon warrants, Apple, all of these warrants. And there was an interesting bit of information that the judge included in his ruling. And it seems to me that, and I think there's been mention of Brian Kohberger having somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 email addresses or something like that. And one of these email addresses that the cops uncovered is called username, but it's not spelled that way. It's spelled with a Y, username@gmail.com. And it showed that a login had occurred on that account at 4:49 a.m. on November 13th, 2022, soon after the homicides occurred, through what was likely a VPN server.
Wow.
And the detective stated his request for the warrant was to establish Brian Kohberger's previous contacts, locations, correspondences, purchases, and any other information which could aid the investigation into the homicides of the 4 victims. Aside from the argument about them wanting to suppress this, which was denied, wow, pretty interesting that Brian Kohberger, right after the cops are saying this murder occurred, these homicides occurred, 4:49 a.m., right after his phone reconnects to the network or whatever, he says he's out at some park, according to some other documents, doing whatever he's doing at a park, connects through a VPN possibly to some weird recovery email. Is that a really bad fact for the defense? Is that maybe a reason why they wanted to suppress this information?
Yeah, anytime the defense files a motion to suppress or to traverse a warrant, it means they're trying to chip away at the evidence against the client. I mean, obviously, that would be the only reason why you would do it. Otherwise, what's the point?
It's funny, for my Karen Reed followers here, and I gotta say, I don't think I've ever heard one thing that they have filed, that Karen's defense team has filed a motion to suppress in her case. So that kind of tells you right there, all the things that have come forward, they think is complete bullshit, and they can defend against it. It's very interesting.
It's, you don't just file motions just so you can rack up billable hours and get paid by the court. There has to be some legal benefit for your client. And in that particular case, the timeline kind of sinks him where if at certain times he's doing certain entries, sending certain things, it could kind of poke holes in his precious alibi. And it could show some form of consciousness of guilt given the timing of when this stuff was entered and sent. So yes, that's precisely why Ms. Taylor filed that motion. And unfortunately, it lacked merit.
The defense was arguing that basically these warrants weren't specific enough, the affidavits weren't specific enough, and that the Apple, Amazon, Google, all of these warrants violated his rights and his rights to privacy. The judge says otherwise.
Yeah. Look, the law does not require certainty when you prepare an affidavit of probable cause. The standard is probable cause, not absolute certainty, not definitiveness. As long as under the totality of the circumstances, you are looking for evidence that probably points to the commission of a crime and probably points to him being the defendant, being the perpetrator, under the totality of the circumstances, the court can deny that motion because in its totality, everything corroborates each piece that was part of that puzzle. And the court found that there was no flagrant misconduct, no intentional knowing lies, or any type of outrageous government conduct. Everything was based on approximations and something rooted in probability rather than certainty. And that's enough constitutionally.
I want to get now to the Franks hearing and him denying the request for the Franks hearing. He found that these law enforcement officers, in his estimation, he found them credible. He didn't feel like they were making reckless or intentional misstatements. And he didn't feel this is really important because a lot of people were like, oh my God, after the last hearing, and Ann Taylor was saying that, DM, the surviving roommate, was saying she couldn't tell if she was, what she saw was a dream, and she was kind of doubting herself, and she was intoxicated that night. The judge is coming out.
I'm going to be honest with you. I love watching the chat. I think the chat is great. And that's why I love doing these live shows. Because it's awesome to see how people are thinking. And when I look at the chat and I see things, I'm like trying to picture, like, for instance, I'll look at Great Dane's mom. I'm like, all right, I wonder what she looks like. Is she on her phone right now? Or is she on a laptop or an iPad typing? That's how I always think about that stuff. I think it's pretty funny. And that's why we do this. We love the live chat. We love to have the debate. We love to have the back and forth. And yes, it's some of it can get heated and some of it's funny and some of it's just banter. But that's why I love the live shows, because I love the interaction. And that's what makes all of this exciting, and to go through this stuff. And I've been talking about this earlier on my 2 lives that I had today. I like puzzles. I like solving puzzles. I like putting pieces together. How do we get from point A to point Z and everything in between? And is it a possibility, or could it have happened? Those are like all the questions that we ask in life. We want to know all those things. And I love looking and seeing everybody's individuality and their thoughts and what they believe. And it's what makes humans amazing on this planet, that we can take a common subject, something like this that we're looking at, and have 2 sides of the perspective where someone says, no, he's not guilty, and this is why. In my opinion, he's not guilty, and this is why. These things don't add up. And then we look at the other side and say, well, hell yeah, he's guilty. and these are all the things. And that is what happens in a jury room, in a court of law. And this is, I love it. I really love this stuff. It's awesome. I think it's really good. All right, let's keep playing on here.
Out and saying, look,
watching the chat today.
Her statements, her 3 interviews were remarkably consistent. And she's saying these things, but they didn't need to provide that as exculpatory information in an affidavit. They basically were honest in these affidavits, according to what he believes. So he's saying, look, just because she couldn't identify him in a lineup or through his mugshot because he was wearing a mask, he's like, of course she couldn't identify him. He was wearing a mask, the guy that she saw. That's of no consequence. So your thoughts on him denying the request for a Franks hearing, because the defense really kind of went after DM and said, look, they should have said, she's saying she didn't know if this was a dream or not. But he's saying her interviews were consistent with law enforcement, all of those interviews.
That's awesome, Laura.
Well, there are 2 important legal points. Number 1, whatever inconsistent statement she gave or whatever fuzziness there may have been in her recollections are great fodder for cross-examination should she testify at trial. And you can impeach her credibility with her drunkenness at the time, or maybe she was hung over after the fact, that kind of thing. But most important, and constitutionally, that if you sever all the statements that law enforcement relayed in the affidavit of probable cause about what, if anything, she relayed, there was still enough in the affidavit to show probable cause. So, and the court found that even assuming there were inconsistencies.
I'm going to ask Nan, because Nan is an attorney. Nan, your opinion in this, do you think they got this guy dead to rights? I do. I'm just very surprised of all the people in the chat that think that this is a conspiracy and this has all been Bryan Kohberger is framed. You know, you got to look at every case on an individual basis. What evidence do they have? You know, everything is not a conspiracy. Everything is not planted. Does a lot of that happen? Fuck yeah. I mean, we see in the Karen Reed case, but you know, from studying this and watching it from its early conception of when this happened, I don't know. I just think they have the guy dead to rights unless something comes up the trial and they have a photo of him or a video that he's 10 miles down the road and he's not there. That's the other thing that's very strange about this, is that you are being accused of a horrible quadruple murder and you haven't produced, like, hey, here's a gas station receipt. I wasn't there, or I was with a friend. You know, I was getting a Subway sandwich. No, I'm at a park on a cloudy night stargazing. All right, bro. Good stuff. Because that's what I do at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know. Does anybody in this room, I'm serious, does anybody go out and stargaze on cloudy nights at 2 in the morning? Let me know in the chat. Because I think that's one of the weakest alibis I've ever heard in my entire life. Let me see. I'm going to go back up here. But yeah, I don't know. I've never done that before. Maybe someone in here has. I don't go, oh shit, it's a cloudy night. Let's go out and stargaze. I don't know. I usually do that on clear nights.
Or falsities, if you will, as to what she may have said. It didn't rise to the level of constitutional outrageousness to say that this was knowing and intentionally reckless.
Do you do it on cloudy nights?
No, you didn't meet your burden under the totality of the circumstances. There is ample probable cause.
And finally, they wanted to throw out, you know, the arrest in Pennsylvania at his parents' house, because they decided at the last minute to do kind of a no-knock warrant. You know, they drove the Bearcat into the driveway that they were in, the armored vehicle. They kind of announced they were there, and then boom, they
love it.
Bash in the door, and they go in and they grab him out of a bedroom. And then they wanted to suppress any statements that he made, even though he had been Mirandized, because they were saying, oh, that's fruit of the poisonous tree because you rammed in his door when you didn't have to. Judge Hippler's saying, nah, I don't think so. this was fine. And they're saying, Judge Hippler's saying he's walking around the house.
So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this right now. I have the complete Kopacka case file. Complete Kopacka case file. It's many, many, many pages. Pages of things that I don't ever want to read ever again, because a lot of the racist statements that Kopacka made during that whole standout, what am I thinking here? The whole lockout with police, and he said horrible things. And I've read through those documents before. I went through them, I think, once or twice on the live, and it's documents I don't ever want to read ever again. But not once in that case, ever, were Brian Kohberger's name and Brent Kopacka's name ever linked in that case. And it's totally been debunked. His best friend, Kopacka's best friend, has been very vocal across social media and said, y'all crazy, you all need to stop. Let this man rest. And I believe, I have to go along with that. Let's drop the whole Kopacka thing. I just don't think that he had anything to do with it. Coincidence that it all happened right around that same time? Sure. Sure. But looking through the case file, it's funny. I have some of the body cam footage on my channel. I was actually sourcing the whole file, but there was so much to be uploaded and transferred over. I just ended up dropping the whole thing at once because it just never really led anywhere. All right, let's keep going through here.
He's got a hoodie on at night, late at night. He may have realized he was being surveilled by law enforcement. His car is parked in his parents' garage, and he's going out there in the late at night with a plastic baggie, and he's got the key fob, maybe unlocking it and locking the door. They think he's destroying evidence, and then he's walking around with plastic gloves on. So Andy had a handgun in his bedroom. So there were all these things that kind of made them think, we got to just bust in there and get this guy.
Well, 2 points. Number one, the Constitution no longer requires suppression of evidence under the exclusionary rule if you fail to, just as a courtesy, knock and announce your presence. Remember, they had a search warrant or an arrest warrant. They went there already armed with the documents that they need to take him into custody, and merely knocking on the door is a courtesy. Constitutionally, they did away with that requirement for purposes of suppression, I think back in 2012 in a case called Hudson versus Michigan. But even assuming that the right to knock and announce survives, your remedy is purely civil, meaning you might have a civil rights lawsuit against the cops for, bulldozing their way through and damaging things and seizing things, that type of situation. But most important, what the court found is that even in that scenario, the police can
y'all go down some really crazy wormholes, in my opinion. Again, I would love this. Please, someone write me at letstalklivepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your explanation of how Kohberger's DNA got on that knife sheath and how this is all framed, and how you've all figured this out. I'm serious. I won't criticize you. I won't judge you. I just want to know. I like to know different perspectives. Or if anybody in the chat wants to start typing it out, I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear that. I think it'd be good. Let's see. Oh, we got Papa Roger checking in for $1.99. Says midnight forest walks looking for Virginia timber. So Papa Rogers makes an announcement in the LTL media chat room. I love it. Papa Rogers in the chat room. Must be Kohberger from the jail cell.
Dispense with knocking and announcing their presence in an exigent situation. So if you have an emergency type situation where, first of all, you're there because of a violent crime, not some petty offense like somebody passing bad checks or joyriding a car, but you're there on a 4-count homicide. That's number one. And number two, there's fear that this person could still be armed. And number three, that this person might try to escape. You can dispense with knocking and announcing your presence and just go in and take him in and seize whatever is in plain sight. And the court was not going to kick a 4-count murder just for failing to knock on the door, wait a few extra seconds in a situation where the police actually went and got a search and an arrest warrant signed by a magistrate based on probable cause. It just wasn't there, and suppression is no longer the remedy.
Yeah, it was some interesting reading, Philip. We learned a lot.
Yeah.
We learned a lot of new information, and I'm not sure that the judge's rulings were unexpected. I think some people thought, oh, maybe there's something there with the IGG arguments, but the judge said no way. So stay tuned. I mean, this did not go well for Brian Kohberger.
Oh.
If you're Brian Kohberger's lawyer,
you shitting.
what is your next step? Because they've kind of said in the past, this is going to trial. I mean, what do you do? Do you explore any options? Like, all this stuff is coming in. Do you explore any options? Like, do you go to the prosecutor and say, hey, would you take the death penalty off the table if he just agrees to life without parole?
Precisely. You work up the mitigation now, because I think he really is sunk in the guilt phase. They have ample evidence to get a conviction. The real question now is, do the aggravators outweigh the mitigators? What can you show the prosecution by way of psych reports, accomplishments, the lack of a record, and your client's willingness to maybe plead out and take a deal for life without parole in exchange for taking what I call the wall off the table, the wall meaning the firing squad, or certainly the needle, lethal injection. And that would be a tremendous victory in a case like this, because if history is any clue, an Idaho jury is not afraid to sentence people to death. And we saw this with Chad Daybell not too long ago. They had no problem sending him to death row. So he is now condemned, awaiting a death warrant. And it would not surprise me in the least if the same thing happened to Brian Kohberger. So the question now is, what can we do to save his life, not to walk him? And that's what I would do. I would work up mitigation now to plead it out.
I was going to say, plead it out.
4 kids slaughtered in the middle of the night for no reason at all.
None.
Just horrific. Philip Dubé, thank you so much.
We're going to watch this other video too, which is really interesting. It's called the 2022 University of Idaho killings mapped by a forensic expert, the murder maps. And this is by the Daily Wire. But before I get to that, I want to just do this for a lot of people that don't know. I've had this bookmark for quite a while, and I love how they put all these documents. It's a wonderful website. I wish like all of the states would do this, because sometimes the states have wacky ways of how they post documents. But I'll drop the link in there if you want to bookmark it for yourself. And every time there's a new document drop, you can go here. And, a lot of people were asking about look at all the orders to seal, especially on the 28th. But you can look at in February of 2023. But here's all orders that they took out: Amazon, American Express, Apple, AT&T, Bank of America, Banner Band, Block, Blue Ridge Knives, Charter Communications, Coeur d'Alene Police Department, Forensic Lab. You have Discovery, Dropbox, eBay, and the list goes on and on and on. Verizon Wireless, the Washington State University. These are all things that we don't have privy to of what is in there. K-Bar Knives, Match.com, Meta Platforms. Everybody says, oh, there's no connection. We don't know. But it could be in all these sealed documents. I think they got a lot on this guy. Venmo, PayPal, Snapchat, Reddit, T-Mobile, the Postal Service, Verizon Wireless again, Walmart. That was apparently where the receipt that they found for the onesie, the mechanics uniform. You have Yahoo, you have TikTok, you have Yik Yak. I've been through all of these on my channel. It's just been a long time. I've been I've been just behind on this and a little rusty. It happens when you start to focus on other things. But I'll drop the link in there again. You can jump, bookmark it, go through all the documents. They're all there. I love how this, they outline this whole thing, and they just keep going. I mean, there's tons of these, 2 years full of documents, and it's big. It's a long case, and it's going to be much debated. All right, let's go into this here from Daily Mail. The killings mapped out by a forensic scientist. Here we go.
Murderers come back. They'll come back to the scene. I've had a couple of crime scenes where murderers actually show up back at the crime scene while I'm there. The game plan was to go there to kill one person. And then you go into that bedroom and that person's next to somebody else. So now you got to kill the second.
And there's video of him. What was it? Is it called Albertsons supermarket? Supposedly later in the next day. And maybe the chat can correct me. There's rumored to be, or allegedly, there's some video of him at an Albertsons that was later on in that day around, I think, noontime after the killings, which would be very interesting to see as well too. How was his, what was his actions inside that grocery store, and what was he doing?
Second person. Now you hear noise downstairs, and now your attention is drawn to them, and so that becomes victim 3 and 4. This case is the ultimate horror story. This is not like what they call a misdemeanor homicide, where it's like an active criminal that gets killed. These are just normal people living their lives. This is Murder Maps.
Today we'll be plotting out every detail of the University of Idaho murders on a map.
It should be interesting. I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree, but this would be interesting. And thank you again for being here. I know this is a very controversial. I get more controversy in this chat than I do my Karen Reed chats. It's amazing. It's amazing how people are just so polarized on this case, either one side or the other. And it's good. I think it's good for the public discourse to have these conversations. But I'll be curious to see. I skimmed through some of this video earlier. I want to watch it in its completion, and I'm going to be watching the chat. Believe me. Let's go here.
I'm a senior crime scene analyst, retired from the New York City Police Department. Let's start with the night of the murder.
Well, this would be good refresher.
With any investigation, there is a timeline. What happens before the crime, what happens during the crime, and then what happens after the crime.
On the night of November 12th, 2022, University of Idaho undergraduate students and best friends Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves went out to the Corner Club Bar in Moscow, Idaho.
So here's the Corner Club Bar.
Meanwhile, Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle, also students at the University of Idaho, went to a frat party at the Sigma Chi House, approximately 1.4 miles across town.
Madison and Kaylee are at the Grub Truck here, right down the block from the Corner Club Bar.
At 1:40 a.m., Madison and Kaylee left the bar and were captured on video at a local food vendor, Grub Truck, a 7-minute walk away. The men seen here in the footage of the girls at Grub Truck are not considered suspects, according to authorities.
We have suspects originally that come up that are from the Grub Truck video. So those two people come up in the investigation, of course. But investigators ruled them out pretty quickly. They're proven to be somewhere else during this crime.
All 4 victims returned home by around 2 a.m. that morning.
The murders happened here at 1122 King Road.
An hour after the students returned home, a white Hyundai Elantra appeared in surveillance video in the neighborhood.
That's part of any investigation. You want to do what they call a surveillance canvas. Any cameras that could capture routes into, out of the crime scene or at the crime scene, those need to be analyzed. You want to see who's there, who's coming and going, and certainly in this case, vehicles that are traveling in that area. A white Hyundai Elantra is seen several times circling this area of 1122 King Road.
Despite the house being on a dead-end street, the car could be seen passing the home several times that night, including once at around 4:04 a.m.
So there's AI software that can identify vehicles, looking at the shape of it, the size of it, the number of doors, and it gives you possibilities of what that vehicle could be, and sometimes even model ranges. So I think this was like a 2011 to 13 Hyundai Elantra, white 4-door sedan. Now let's take a look at the floor plan of the house.
1122 King Road in Moscow was a 3-story, 6-bedroom home. All 4 victims were asleep on the 2nd and 3rd floors the night of the murders.
2 of the victims were found here on the 3rd floor. These victims were Madison and Kaylee. 2 of the victims are found here on the 2nd floor. This was
you know, it was kind of interesting, and Jeff is talking about this, the PCA. You know, what's very interesting about this, and I want to stop the video for a second, because I don't want to get nailed, and we need to do some pauses on these streams when we do them for fair use. But my bigger point in all of this and talking about this was many, many, many moons ago, way back before it was even talked about. It's just actually been recently talked about, and I didn't really hear a lot of people talking about this either, was when you go through that PCA and you hear, based on the forensic downloads of Dylan Mortenson's phone, and now I'm going to get screwed up with the other witness in the house, and I'm totally losing it here, and I know I'm going to get killed on this right now. But due to the forensic downloads, we estimated the crime happened between you know, this time and this time, and I went, they were texting each other. And I remember this came, thank you, Bethany, thank you. They were texting each other, and this was like an epiphany we had one night. I had one of my panel friends on, and we were talking about this, and I was like, they were texting each other, because I just kept reading through the PCA, and I went, wait a minute, they were texting each other. They were talking. They you know, they were hearing things, and they just actually recently started talking about that. And I'm like, we knew this kind of like all along. Yes, Bethany Funk, thank you. This happens when you're on to like another case for 2 years and there's names and timelines and everything. Sometimes this happens, and I'm old now. I tend to forget. All right, let's keep playing through this.
It is believed that the killer entered the home through the sliding glass door here on the 2nd floor of the location.
Yes, 3 lives today.
A key witness in this case is a surviving roommate who was home the night of the murders. Around 4 a.m., she reported hearing crying from the 2nd floor of the home and a man's voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you."
That's creepy. And I think sometimes we tend to forget about Bethany because we hear so much about Dylan. Dylan's been like kind of the forefront person that's been always talked about in all of this. So you tend to forget, you know what I mean? But Bethany Funk is part of this as well.
In this case, we have a witness that lives on the 2nd floor of that location. She hears something going on during the time of the attack. This sort of evidence is what they call testimonial evidence. In any trial, you're going to have physical evidence and testimonial evidence. Testimonial evidence is what people say. What does my witness say? What does my victim say? What does my suspect say? They could be telling you the truth, they could be mistaken, or they could be lying.
The surviving roommate opened her bedroom door and witnessed a masked man standing in her house. She froze as the man walked right by her and out of the sliding glass door.
Crazy.
Now, why is that? Why is not victim number 5? Could be that he didn't see her as a threat. She's not blocking the doorway. And maybe he didn't see her at all. Like, his focus is on the door. I'm getting out of here. I just killed 4 people. I want to escape as quick as possible and not even notice this person. And it could be also that like the game plan was to go there to kill 1 person. And then you go into that bedroom and that person's next to somebody else. So now you got to kill the 2nd person. Now you hear noise downstairs. Maybe Ethan and Xana are awake and they're like, I hear somebody in the house. Someone's upstairs. And now your attention's drawn to them.
Oh, wow.
And so that becomes victim 3 and 4. And then number 5 just wasn't in your route. You didn't see him, or they didn't pose a threat, and you're wearing a mask anyway. How could they identify you? From the beginning, the police said this was a targeted attack. I'm assuming during trial, we're going to learn a lot more about this case than what we know.
Yeah.
And it could be something very specific that he was fixated on one of the female victims. When he goes to kill the one girl, all these other people are collateral.
The surviving roommate that witnessed the murder in the house described him as 5'10", athletically built but not muscular, with bushy eyebrows.
She only had the opportunity to see this person for a couple seconds. What could you remember in a couple seconds? And then add in, what was the lighting like? What was your state of mind? Are you just waking up? Are you kind of groggy? Or do you think something's happening and there's this fight or flight reaction your body's going through? You're not going to remember every single detail. It's actually more suspect when someone comes with a lot of detail. They're highly detailed in the description, and they give so much minutia about, oh, the person, was wearing this style of clothing and brands and all this other stuff. Just think, well, how can you remember that much from that couple seconds of time. And usually there is some sort of editorializing with that. People are adding to their memory from that. So I think the description is what you would expect for most cases. 50 feet west of Xana's bedroom, audio is picked up on a surveillance camera somewhere about here.
It's crazy.
Now, audio evidence comes up quite frequently in cases. It comes up in the form of surveillance, like we have in this case, but also from body cam footage. It comes up from 911 phone calls. Some of these newer cameras, even like a Ring doorbell cam, can pick up sounds from 50 feet away.
3 minutes after the security camera picked up that audio, a white Hyundai Elantra was...
You said inside job. So who did it? Who inside the house did it? You said inside job. So you would implicate that someone inside the house did it, right? You're not saying it's Kohberger. So who's your killer? I'm just curious. And that's why I was saying, like, I'm curious to see how the people that are very pro Kohberger, how they think in this. And again, email me. Let's talk live podcast @gmail.com. Put in the subject line Idaho 4. I just want to hear. I'm curious to see where you land on this, because it may sway me. I don't know. But I think they got this guy dead to rights. I think they have a lot more that we haven't seen, because a lot of this stuff is sealed. Keep that in mind. A lot of this stuff is sealed. And when it all comes out in court, I think that when people watch this trial, if it gets to trial and he doesn't take a plea deal, I think their jaws are going to drop on the ground once you find out all these connections and what went on. I'm telling you, I think that there is a lot that we haven't heard in this case.
Captured in video footage leaving the neighborhood.
So the crime happened somewhere between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. The police are called just before noon the next day. So it's about 8 hours, 7.5 to 8 hours.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Aren't called.
Yeah, I talked about the Bluetooth speaker. Yep. Yeah, I talked about that. So Coffee Cake thinks it's Bryson Gill, and he was in the, and I'm not going to say that name because it's disgusting, but that's who Bryson thinks did this. I'm hoping they will, Shirley. From what I know right now, they are going to be allowed in the courtroom. Peggy seems to think I'm going to eat crow on this, and that's Peggy's opinion. You know, we can agree to disagree, but I think that they got this guy pinned pretty hard.
So this comes up in question and even draws attention to the 2 surviving roommates that live in that house. These things happen. 911's not always called immediately.
I think
you
it's
don't know
just
how you're going to act until you're in that situation. You think, oh, I was going to call 911 right away. I'm going to take action. I'm going to fight. I'm going to do this or that. But until you're in that situation, you don't know what you're going to do.
At 11:58 a.m. that morning, a 911 call was made from a surviving roommate's phone. Responding officers found 4 victims in the house, all with multiple stab wounds from a large knife.
Terrible.
Let's take a closer look at the accused murderer, Brian Kohberger.
Brian Kohberger was born November 21st, 1994. He was 28 at the time of the murders.
Brian grew up here in Effort, Pennsylvania. He graduated from Pleasant Valley High School, 2.3 miles away from his home here. So it is alleged that Brian Kohberger had dealt with some bullying when he was growing up, some weight issues, as well as being kind of an outsider, being depressed. He suffered from this condition called VSS, or visual snow syndrome, which is like a rare neurological disease. And you basically walk around with old school TV static in your vision all the time. So they know it is associated with migraine headaches, depression, anxiety, and this dissociation. Just because you were picked on, you were depressed, you have VSS, doesn't mean that you're going to go out and commit a crime. This trope of the killer getting revenge on somebody is not always the case. Correlation is not causation. What would be interesting then is that we have this documented neurological disorder, his history dealing with depression and drugs. I could see the defense using this if he's convicted, because in the state of Idaho, he could possibly be executed. So if he's convicted, maybe keeping him off death row by saying, oh, listen, this poor kid, he has this condition, he's in this dissociative fugue state. When he kills these people, he didn't know what he was doing. Not that, he shouldn't go to jail, but at least let's keep him alive. Which brings us to his time in Washington State.
At the time of the murders, Kohberger was a PhD criminology student at Washington State University's Pullman campus. He was also a teaching assistant.
Certainly, if you are a criminal justice student, you know how investigations run, not only what killers do, but how the law enforcement end of it works and how trials work. So he has intimate knowledge of the criminal justice system. It has been speculated that having this knowledge is what helped him plot out his crime and how to cover up his tracks afterwards. Again, correlation is not causation. There are plenty of criminal justice students that aren't criminals. He lived at Steptoe Village Apartments. That is 10.9 miles away from the scene of the crime.
His neighbors at the Steptoe Village Apartments told reporters that Kohberger's demeanor changed and that he even asked them about the murders in the days following the crime.
So there is reports that Brian Kohberger was talking about this case with one of his neighbors back in Washington. Not a good tactic if you are someone that committed a crime. You don't want to bring attention to that crime, talk about that crime, tell anyone that you know anything about that crime. That's the first rule about committing a crime. Don't tell anybody. Shut your mouth. It could be him flexing his criminal justice muscles, trying to impress them, say, hey, I think it's this motive. I know, I'm an expert. But it also could be that he gets some sort of perverse satisfaction of talking about this and to a stranger. And then in his mind, it's like, this person doesn't know that I did this. But a smart criminal would not talk about it. Because now in your mind, you're connected to this crime with your neighbor. And as more information comes out, now they're looking for a white Elantra. Now your neighbor's like, oh, I was just talking about that case with Brian. What does he drive? Oh, white Elantra. And now you become part of the investigation. Now let's talk about the murder weapon. The murder weapon has never been recovered, so we don't know where it is. So in this case, we don't have a murder weapon recovered. In a murder case, you want to have that murder weapon. You want to have that connection. This is a key piece that was used. Maybe the victim's blood is on the blade. Maybe your suspect's DNA is on the handle. But just because we don't have it doesn't mean we can't prosecute somebody. We have cases where we prosecute someone without even having a body. And just think, like, as the person who commits a crime, what is the first thing you're looking to get rid of? It's going to be that key piece of evidence. I'm sure they spent hundreds and hundreds or thousands of hours looking for this murder weapon, and they still haven't found it. Or they do have it, and they haven't released all the information yet on the case. Let's look at Kohberger.
That's right. And I have my mute on. I'm sorry. I said that a long time ago, a couple years ago in this, that they could have this knife and they just haven't said it. And that's the one in the case that they just pull up and they go, and here's the murder weapon. We found it in the park where we were stargazing. I'm just saying, but that could be a possibility. It could be a possibility. And I said that way in the beginning of this. I mean, look at all the things. If you're a Karen Reed, if you watch the Karen Reed case in my videos here and my lives here in Karen's case, how many times did we hear during the trial things that we didn't even know about, and our mouths dropped and went, what? I mean, even Turtle Boy that covers the Karen Reed case, up, left, right, whatever. I mean, there were times during hearings and during the trial, even his mouth was dropping. So more stuff does come out at trial. And again, I just want people to understand that you're only hearing a smidget of what is going on in this case, because there's so many things that are sealed. Why are they sealed? Why are they trying to seal all this off from the public? Keep that into account. It's very interesting.
Movements after the murders.
According to cell phone data and surveillance footage, the morning after the murders took place, Kohberger traveled 30 miles south from his apartment to Clarkston, Washington.
He stopped at Kate's Cup of Joe at 12:36 p.m. on November 13th. That is 35 miles from his apartment. To get there, Kohberger would have to cross the Snake River that divides Idaho and Washington state. Now, I don't know if this is likely, but it would be a good place to ditch evidence. You throw something that has DNA on it into water, it's not going to survive for a very long period of time. Some period of time, but not for days, weeks, or months. There's no linkage there. It doesn't have the blood of the victim on it. So we don't know if it's a murder weapon. 10 minutes later, he's seen at this Albertsons grocery store nearby. Now, it could be something just ordinary. He's there to buy groceries. He's there to buy toilet paper, paper towels. Or it could be to purchase stuff to help him clean up after himself in a crime scene. Bleach, garbage bags, things like that, to get rid of evidence he may still have. So after the crime, Brian goes back to his life. He was known as kind of a hard person to get along with, very argumentative. And then after, he's kind of disheveled now. Could be that this crime affected him. The next major plot point in this case is Kohberger driving cross country with his father. Now we're at the Christmas break. Brian's going to go home. His dad flies out from Pennsylvania to Washington to take this long cross country journey. Kohberger and his dad drove in his white Hyundai Elantra from Washington State University all the way to his parents' home in the Chestnut Hill Township of Pennsylvania. That's approximately 2,531 miles of driving.
On their cross-country drive, Brian and his dad are pulled over twice within 9 minutes of each other, just outside of Indianapolis.
He's pulled over for tailgating right here in Indiana. He's let off with a warning, and 9 minutes later, he's pulled over again here in Indiana for the same exact infraction. Being too close to the car in front of him. Could be that he just wanted to get out of there as quick as possible. And he's only within a couple hours of leaving Washington. Cop pulls him over. His interaction on video seems like he's pretty calm. And then he tells him who he is. And then the cop leaves him with a warning. And then 9 minutes later, he gets pulled over for the same damn thing. The father's also interjecting, he's proud of his son.
Coming from Washington State University. So y'all work at the university there?
Actually, okay. But again, he's let go. These two car stops had nothing to do with the investigation. They just happened, just like the odds to get pulled over twice for the same thing could be telling to a jury. Could be like, all right, this guy was trying to escape really quick. And he was on somebody's ass the whole time. And he does it again. That's how far he wants to get from this incident.
Do you think his dad knew at this point?
Look at this.
I don't think his dad knew. He's been quoted online as having a lot of respect for his father. I think he would be afraid to disappoint him. I just don't see how it would benefit him. Sure, confessing sometimes makes people feel better, and that's why they do it, but I don't think that's the audience for him. Let's take a closer look at some of the details of the victims.
Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were all students at the University of Idaho.
Two of the victims worked here at the Mad Greek restaurant. So in the affidavit, there is evidence that Brian had visited the Mad Greek restaurant at least twice before the murders happened. What does this tell us? Well, maybe this is his opportunity that he meets his victims. Xana and Maddie worked at that restaurant, and maybe he was obsessed with them. So we have this connection now, or a nexus between our killer and our victims. If you didn't have that connection, it's hard to prove motive. And then from that restaurant, maybe that's how he finds out their social media accounts. He finds Maddie, and then who are they friends with? Who else do they live with? Befriends them as well. And now he's got insight. He's got eyes inside that crime scene. What does that room look like? What does that house look like? What's the layout? As well as possibly doing reconnaissance, driving there, looking at these bedrooms, comparing them to photographs from social media. That's what an organized killer would do. In the autopsy reports, you have multiple puncture wounds, lacerations. One victim said had more than another. That could be the intended target. Who knows? Maybe that's just something.
I'm going to pause real here and bring this up. Paula says Brian Landry's parents knew in Gabby Petito's case, burn after reading. It's kind of funny. I just watched that Netflix series. I think it was a 3-part series. Great series on Gabby Petito. If you haven't watched it, you have Netflix, check it out. And I find it, and this has been like kind of the question in all of this. Isn't it amazing that the police searched through that entire area where Brian Landry was to be after he unalived himself, and not even 10 minutes that the parents were down there, they knew exactly where he was, where to be found. It's insane. And how his parents, or at least his mom, was not charged in any of that. I mean, they knew what he did. And when the cops came up there to basically try to get some information about where Gabby was at his parents' house, they're like, talk to our lawyer. I mean, come on, dude. They knew what he did. But that's crazy. And if you haven't watched it, check out that Netflix series. It's very good. It's tragic. It's sad, but very well done and documented.
Someone that was fighting. One of the victims, of the 4 of them, had defensive. That means that they have their hands out. They're trying to defend themselves, and they have injuries to those hands or arms. I wouldn't be surprised if the defensive wounds were either on Xana or Ethan, because they maybe have heard someone was in a house, and then now they're in the pathway of the killer. Let's map out the investigation. So the victims lived here.
Kohberger's phone was tracked heading to Moscow before the attacks, but was turned off between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m.
Most crimes are not planned and plotted. So you don't think I'm going to turn my cell phone off and I'm going to kill this person, because it just happens. You know, it's an argument that escalates, it's something stupid. Most crimes are not planned by organized killers. But for someone that's going to come up with a game plan, someone that's going to stalk somebody, they're going to think my cell phone could be linking me to that crime scene, I'm going to turn it off. According to an affidavit, Kohberger's phone was in the area of the crime scene on 12 different locations prior to the murder. Most of these instances in the middle of the night. That is certainly something that is going to weigh heavy on the minds of the jury. Does that mean he killed them? No, it just means that he was there before. The prosecution is going to put their slant on it, saying this is him doing his stalking. This is him coming up with his game plan, observing the crime scene before he gets there, knowing which door he's going to enter, which door he's going to exit, where does my victim live. Defense is going to say, hey, this guy, he likes to drive around at night because he likes to go watch the stars. And these towns are close. They're 8.5 miles away. So why not drive there? They could probably bring up him driving around at the same time of night.
Driving around.
In another location. It all has to do with how it's presented to the jury.
Driving around. I think I have my little, let me see if I have my little sound bite still. The driving around sound bite. Oh, I got it. Driving around. Oh, I forgot I had that. That's good stuff. Driving around.
And how they're going to.
Then Ann Taylor, she used to go back and quote all the laws from like 1742. And we had the little, I don't even know if I have that song anymore. Let's see. Do I have it anymore? I don't know if I do. Let's see. Yeah. We used to. All right, let's keep playing here.
In addition to those 12 times, cell phone data revealed Kohberger's phone back at the crime scene at 9 a.m. the morning following the murders.
Some investigators, if they're smart and experienced, if you have that crime scene tape up, you have a crowd on the other side of the tape, you surreptitiously take your phone and start taking photographs, because sometimes the killer's there. And that could be for a couple of different reasons. It could be they're curious to see where the investigation's at. You know, so overhear the detectives saying they have this or that, or don't have this or that. It could be a perverse pleasure you get from revisiting that crime scene. Or it could be, in this case, that the killer realized that they left a key piece of forensic evidence inside that house. And maybe they wanted to go back into the house to retrieve it. Here's what they found inside the house. Investigators found a knife sheath on the 3rd floor next to Madison. So how do you leave that behind? If your intended target lives in that one bedroom, you take your knife out, you put down the sheath, you start stabbing that person. Maybe during an act, they roll away from you and they roll on top of that. And now you have another person that starts waking up, that your attention is drawn to them. You start stabbing them. You've now forgotten about that knife sheath. And now you hear someone downstairs, that's someone else that is drawing your attention away from that evidence that you're leaving behind.
The Idaho State Lab found a single source of male DNA on the button snap of the knife sheath.
They recover unknown male DNA. That unknown male DNA is then first compared to anyone that had legal access. Does it belong to one of the victims, to someone who was the boyfriend of one of these people? And it doesn't match any of those people. They take that generated male DNA profile and they put it into one of these commercial DNA websites. And what these websites do is they may say that you're 23% Italian, you know, whatever they're going to tell you. But also what they tell you is,
I tell you right now, I would never, ever, 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 ever submit my DNA to any of these websites. Never, ever, 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 ever. Don't do it, folks. It's not a good idea. Don't do it.
From that, investigators will get some more information. A genealogist will look at this data and they start building out these genetic DNA trees from there. Who's related to who? We get a hit to someone it could be related to. One of these people is Brian Kohberger's father. They get a warrant. They start surveilling the house where Brian Kohberger's family lives in Pennsylvania, and they start going through that trash. And now we have this definitive match that someone related, and now they have probable cause to arrest Brian Kohberger. They do a cheek sample from inside of his mouth, and now we have a match to the DNA that's from that knife sheath. It's time to look at the arrest and the trial.
All right, real quick, let me just get this, and then we're going to finish up about another 5 minutes here. I got to know, $2 says, love your show, Brian. Too tired to chat tonight. That's okay. We bring back the Idaho, you know, the people that used to follow in the very beginning of the channel. We bring the Idaho crew in here. We'll be talking about this more. It's good to do a refresher here. And again, I love the chat. I love the chat. I think it's great. I love the back and forth. It's always good. About another 5 minutes. Oh, God, I didn't even think we were 2 hours. About another 5 minutes, going to wrap up. I've done a lot of streaming today. 3 times, triple dip. And I will be most likely taking tomorrow off. We'll see how things go. But I got a lot of personal stuff to attend to tomorrow. All right, here we go. 5 more minutes. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for being here. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe this first time here. Smash the like button. Let's go. I haven't done it.
Kohberger was arrested at his family's home on December 30th. So 6 weeks after the murder, Brian Kohberger is arrested. This is actually a good amount of time. This is not like a super fast investigation where they rush things and they missed a bunch of stuff. They took their time. They made sure they got the right person, it seems, and they went through all the steps not to get this evidence thrown out in court. Because that's the last thing you want to do is just collect something. You went through all this trouble to collect it, and then it's not allowed to be used as evidence in court because, you know, improper procedure or you needed a warrant and didn't have one. He first appeared in court on January 3rd in Monroe County, Pennsylvania.
The next day, on January 4th, Kohberger was extradited from Pennsylvania to Idaho. He's facing 4 counts of first-degree murder as well as a felony burglary charge.
So in court, he's asked to plead guilty or innocent, and he does not put in a plea.
You understand the charge in count 2, murder in the first degree? Yes.
Your Honor, we will be standing aside.
This is not normal, but this does happen. So in these cases now in modern time, the judge will put in a plea of not guilty for you.
Because Mr. Kohberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge.
They can't put in a guilty plea for you. The judge can't do that. Basically saying, hey, listen, you didn't put in a guilty plea
Appreciate you.
or not guilty plea, but we're going to have a trial and we'll figure out what happened. The trial will be held here in Boise, Idaho, about 6 hours away from the crime scene.
Brian Kohberger's trial is scheduled to start on August 11th, 2025, following jury selection. Additionally, a gag order was placed on investigators and lawyers involved with the case.
So the gag order is for the trial in general. It's the judge who doesn't want to have a mistrial here. They don't want to have legal standing from the defense to say, oh, my client was convicted because something was done improper. So they want to make sure everything is done properly. They want to give that defense as much time as possible to go over the evidence. That's why this is taking so long. The trial set for August of 2025. Originally, the initial dates were like 2 years ago.
In late 2024, Kohberger's attorneys submitted a motion to eliminate certain pieces of evidence from the case. Among those pieces of evidence is their client's genetic information linked to the knife sheath.
If we lose the DNA from the sheath, anything else that comes after that can't be brought into court. So let's say that you collected evidence illegally. Anything else you learn from that point on can't be used in court. This is called the fruits of the poisonous tree. Because the tree is poisoned, anything you get from that tree is also poisoned. Recently, there has been arguments about the collection of the trash, which identifies his father, which gives probable cause to arrest Brian, and then to collect DNA and match to the knife sheath. Now, if I can get out that garbage, if I can't show up to trial, I can't make the connection to the father. I don't have probable cause to get DNA from Brian to connect it to the knife sheath. So that isn't brought into court. So there's that example of the poisonous tree and the fruit that comes from that tree. Kohberger is currently being held here at the Ada County Jail. So Brian Kohberger is remanded to custody without a bond. That is very common in cases like this, but most cases are not as severe. They're not as violent. You don't have this flight risk, so you get bond. But you have very violent crime, a lot of media attention. You have a flight risk. The person may be a danger to the community. In those cases, you got to stay in jail to your trial. One year after the murders, 1122 King Road was demolished. It was a reminder of what happened and trauma to the students that were still going to school there. They could see this house every day. So this is the judge's decision to say, okay, we don't plan on going back. But that then becomes a conversation with the prosecution and the defense. Both sides agree that we're not going to bring the jury back to this crime scene. The college could do what they want with it. I don't think it was a bad decision because we have that crime scene locked down, memorialized forever in so many different ways. This scene is documented through thousands of photographs, video, and laser scan technology, where you could go in and you could virtually walk someone through that scene to show every aspect of that house. So it's not gone. We still have it, just in other forms. On November 30th, a candlelight vigil was held for the victims. Grieving family and classmates gathered here at the University of Idaho campus. I will go on a record. I'll say that I think he did it. Yes, there's a lot of evidence. If Brian Kohberger is the killer, this is someone who studied criminology, that they had intimate knowledge of how to try to get away with the crime and did a terrible job at it, left key evidence behind. Will he get convicted? I don't know. Am I right? I don't know. I don't know what the prosecution has and what the defense has. Sometimes these cases are won or lost during jury selection. I had a case where I thought we had all the evidence in the world to convict someone of murder, and the jury didn't think so. Yeah, you may be sure that you think this person did it, but you may not be convicted criminally in a trial.
Kohberger's defense team has sought to remove the death penalty as a possible punishment should he be convicted. Their motions were denied by an Ada County court judge. Kohberger's trial is set to begin August 11th, 2025.
That's where we're at. It's wild just thinking about very, very early on. I think on the very morning after the slayings, there's a news reporter, and I'm sure you've all seen this, and I'd love to hunt the video down and see it again. But there's a news reporter, and in the background, you literally see a white Hyundai Elantra drive by the King Road house. And I think someone took the video and actually slowed it down, and you literally see a white Hyundai Elantra, and you're like, oh man, did he go back to the scene? It's never been proven, but I know that's been out there a lot. And I remember going over that video and just going through it, and it just, it was wild. It was wild. So little rusty, I admit it. I screwed some things up and messed some names up, but a lot of it came back to me. It's been a little while since I've done this, and definitely want to start kicking some more of these lives up as we get closer to trial. I thought this was a pretty good, both videos I thought were pretty good reviews of the case, pretty straightforward. Everybody has their opinion in this chat room. It causes a lot of controversy. A lot, like I said, people, they're just for it or for him or dead against him. And it'll be interesting to see what happens at trial. I think, in my own personal opinion, just knowing, what I've watched of Reed's case over the last going through this the last 2 years and then going through the trial, a lot more things tend to come out at trial. And I think they got a lot more here. So we have to see what the defense has and what the Commonwealth has here. And it will be decided. I think it's still going to be a very difficult case. I think the defense has some sticking points, but on the flip side, I think that the state, we say Commonwealth here in Massachusetts, but I think the state has a lot on this guy and is going to pin him down. They haven't even got into like geofencing and stuff like that. They may have an expert that comes in for geofencing. We know all the forensic data that's been there, all the purchases that he made. It's just things that just really point in the direction. And I'm sure that, this will get all narrowed down when the case happens. So again, if the first time, I'm just actually going to look at the poll real quick. We're going to end the poll. In your opinion, I asked, in your opinion, Brian Kohberger is 63% said guilty, 23% undecided, and 12% said not guilty. 450 votes. Thank you for taking that. I appreciate that. I will be back, hopefully maybe tomorrow night. If not, I do have a lot of personal things that are going on tomorrow, so I have to square through that. Did 3 lives today, so there's plenty of content here on the channel to make sure and go back and watch any of those lives. I have 2 Karen Reed lives that I did, and I have the Idaho 4 live that I did today as well. Before I head out, I just want to make sure and bring a lot of attention to a case that is going on up in upstate New York. There is a case of a man named Robert Brooks. He is an inmate that was killed by the hands of, right now, 6 correctional officers have been indicted in his case, and more charges are said to come down. Other people involved as well. I would love for you all to go back on my channel and watch the content about Robert Brooks. It's a very important case out of New York in the prison system there. And basically what happened, if you haven't heard about it, was Robert Brooks was an inmate at a neighboring correctional institute. He was transferred out of that institute, Mohawk, into Marcy Correctional Institute, about 10 miles apart, for his safety. And as he got received into Marcy, he was beat twice before he actually got inside the facility. And then when he got inside the facility, 4 body cameras activated. They were not turned on by these correctional officers. They did not activate them, but 4 of them turned on and recorded the beating and murder of Robert Brooks. It is an awful, horrible video to watch. I feel that these correctional officers, the charges against them are light. Mostly they will probably take a plea deal and probably walking around in society in 5 to 8 years, maybe 10 years in most cases. But it is very important to watch these lives and share them on all of your social media contacts, because this can never happen again. Look at Robert Brooks. Wasn't a good guy. He committed a crime, stabbed his girlfriend. He was doing his 12 years. Okay. But what happened to him inside Marcy Correctional Facility should and never happen to anybody. He's a human being, and these bastards beat him and murdered him inside that facility. So it is a case I've been watching currently right now, upstate New York. There's a lot of prisons that the correctional officers are protesting, saying for fair and equal rights. And a lot of the facilities right now are being taken and run by inmates because of the strikes that are going on. The National Guard has been deployed up in upstate New York to take over these correctional facilities and help. Hochul is a disaster. Governor Hochul is a disaster up there. And what is going on is out of control. She cannot manage these correctional facilities, and it's insane. It is insane what's going on. So it is this case that I am continuing to watch. I got to give Duty Ron a hell of a lot of credit. Stephen A. Smith, a hell of a lot of credit. They were on this right away and have been shouting this out and calling out these corrupt correctional officers out. And I had Officer Todd McGee on retired state police on my channel the other night. We went through this horrible murder video, and I wanted to hear Todd's perspective on all of it. And he said, there are no words. There are no words what happened. I hope that hate crime, I hope that civil rights attorneys get involved in this, and these fuckers go down for civil rights violations as well. Robert Brooks was a black man, and white officers, the correctional officers, white, and beat the shit out of him, killed him. And I feel it's hate crime. I feel it's a hate crime, and these bastards need to go down. So if you are interested, please check out those videos. And I'll just say this, justice for Robert Brooks, justice for Robert Brooks. And don't let these bastards slip through the cracks. It's a big case, and I will continue to follow it out until its completion. And I appreciate all of you that have gone back and watched that content on my channel, and chimed in on your thoughts on it. So thank you so much. I'm going to end this live. It's been a very long day of streaming for me, but I wanted to get some of these lives out of the way, and I had some really great guests on today. I want to thank all my guests that came on the shows, Mark Mazza Media, and Tom and Mike from Seeking Justice. And it's such a great day. And thank you all for being here today. If you made all 3 lives or you didn't, I appreciate you popping in one of these and expanding the channel, expanding our minds, and having civil conversations about all the things that have gone on in and around our areas. Thank you so much. I'm going to hit the outro. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.